Hello fellow crafters, I'm Karen, and this is part 1 of our 1920s dress tutorial. In this video, I'll be showing you how to make the pleated skirt. If you're like me, then you found yourself in need of a 1920s era costume, but you don't want to dress up like a flapper. And if you've done your homework, then you've probably also learned that patterns are expensive and hard to come by. But the dresses of the era are actually sort of approachable as far as something that one could make. And I'm not speaking as a very experienced seamstress. Sewing is not my go-to sort of craft, but I do have the basic skills, and I think that if you do too, this will be a doable project. We're going to break it down into 3 parts, so this is just part 1, and we're going to be working on the skirt, although this is all part of one larger dress. So for this, I've decided to approach it more like a math problem than a sewing project, which makes it feel a little bit more like it's in my wheelhouse. And you'll need the materials and tools that are up on the screen. These materials here are just for part 1, so you'll see other materials lists when we get to the other 2 parts. But for this, we're going to be starting with our fabric, and the one that I chose is just something that seems to flow very well, and I wanted this because the dresses of the era are sort of boyish in style, and they are just not fitted, so it didn't need to be any sort of stiff fabric. I just wanted it to be something that I could pleat a little and just have drape in a very straight form. So it's just a lightweight fabric. Mine is blue, but of course you could choose whatever color you want. And I bought 4 yards just to be on the safe side. I think it's going to be probably close to double what I need, but always err on the side of buying more so that you don't get very stuck in the middle. You'll also need the thread that matches your fabric, so you want to make sure you buy those at the same time so they go together. And the tools are just everything that we'll need to cut the fabric, iron the fabric, hem the fabric, and sew the fabric. I've decided that a straight skirt is basically a rectangle, and the design that I'm aiming for is sort of a flat panel on the front and back with some pleats along the sides, so at the hips. And so all we need to do is cut a rectangle to get started here. And so I took my hip measurement, and then I decided that I wanted about 6 inches on either side where the pleats will be. So to do these pleats, I'm going to have 3 times the fabric for the distance that I want to end up with. So for 6 inches of pleats, I want to have 18 inches of fabric. So with 18 inches on either side, you can add those up, you get your 36, and then subtract it from whatever your hip measurement is, and figure out what your front and back panels need to be. From there, I just added a couple of inches, which will account for seams and hems and any mistakes that I make along the way, theoretically. So what you want to do is get your fabric ironed if it needs to be, and cut out that rectangle shape. As far as the other dimension, the vertical dimension, I just measured from sort of a low waist point, actually more at the hip, because the style at the time was drop waist, so that meant that the top went really low and the skirt started at that point. So I measured from about the middle of the hip down to just below the knee. I took that measurement, and again I'm adding some, I think about 2 inches to allow for it to be connected at the top to the bodice and for it to be hemmed at the bottom. So we'll cut out that rectangle, and then we'll go on to step 2. With my rectangle cut out and ironed, the next step for me is going to be to pin those pleats. So I want the seam of the whole skirt that connects the one end to the other end to be sort of hidden in one of those sets of pleats, which means that one set of pleats has to be basically the end of the fabric, and then we'll have what will be the front panel of the skirt, and then the other set of pleats will be sort of in the middle, and then we'll have what will be the back panel of the skirt, which then will connect back to the first set of pleats. So we're going to go ahead here and pin these, and I'm going to do them at 1 inch, so it'll be 1 inch and then folds back 1 inch and then goes back again, and I want to pleat them such that the front panel wraps around and sort of incorporates the first pleat. So the first pleat will actually come back towards the front but underneath. So I'm going to get that set up, and we'll get both of those sets pleated. So you want to make sure that once you do the first set, you measure the right size for the front panel before you go on and do the second set so that your front panel is the right size. So I have pinned the pleats on both sides, and this is actually what will be the inside. So if you flip it to the other side, you get an idea for what it will look like when we're done. So with this fabric, it makes it actually kind of look a little like a curtain, but it's got those nice little pleats. This would be the front panel. So like I said before, the front panel comes around and the first pleat tucks underneath that as opposed to the opposite, which would look just a little bit different, more like this side. That's what it'll look like in the back, but I thought it would look better in the front this way. So the side will look roughly like this, and the front is bookended on either side by pleats. The next thing that we need to do is sew up that side seam, which will turn this into an actual skirt shape, which is a loop, instead of just being one long sheet. So the first thing you want to do is mark your back panel so that you have that planned. And then I'm going to loop it around and sort of make sure that I've got my whole distance correct, because you don't want to have it too small at this point because there's not really any fixing it, unless you were to maybe take out some of your pleats. So I want to leave an inch at the end for hemming, so that'll be a fold over and then a fold back under for my hem. And we'll cut off any excess from there, and then we can put the final pleat edge from that very beginning that we did. We'll match that up with the edge from the back panel, sew them together, we'll iron it so we've got a nice hem to work with, and then we'll sew up the hem as well. The side seam is now complete. It is sewn and hemmed. From the outside, it just looks like a straight seam. And on the inside, we have our stitching line. But the last thing we need to do here is to replace that pleat that we took out. So this edge of the fabric will go right up to our marking, which will create that final pleat again. So we just want to put a couple of pins in place to hold that there, and then we can move on to the next step. The next step is to make the bodice, and we won't finish anything else on the skirt until we're done with that. The top of the skirt will get finished when it gets hemmed and connected to the bodice via a seam, and the bottom won't get hemmed until the very end of the project when we're sure that everything is sitting the way it needs to and nothing looks crooked. So you can see where we've landed here with our skirt. We've got our pleats on the side, pinned and ready to be sewn when we attach the bodice. And we've got our one seam on the inside of the one side, which just looks on the outside like one of the pleats. So you can join me in part 2 where we'll make the bodice, and we'll look forward to part 3 where we'll assemble everything. Thanks for supporting Tickled Fancy Crafting by watching this video. This content is available on YouTube and Rumble, so click the like or Rumble button to let me know that you enjoyed the content, and subscribe to see new Tickled Fancy Crafting videos in your feed. If you'd like to be informed directly about the content, ring the notification bell on YouTube or adjust your notification settings on Rumble. Comment with crafts that you would like to see in the future, and remember, you can make this.